Hello guys, it's Twiley X360, and as the title implies, we just reached 200 subscribers. That is amazing. I mean, on some level, I knew it was inevitable, but it definitely happened in a way I didn't expect. So, when did I post that 100 subscriber special Q&A video? 4 years ago, October 13th, 2018. Jeez, a lot has happened in that time. So, 2018 till April of 2023 was 100 subscriber growth. And the channel officially started in 2016. And it grew to 100 in 2018. Well, dang. 200 subscribers in 7 years. And I think we're at 224 subscribers as of the recording of this video right now. Which I still find amazing that 224 people are watching this. Speaking of content my audience is viewing, as the title implies, I am going to be talking about hitching the Trailblazer into the Zipp-ing Storm, the behind-the-scenes aspects, the success it got, the works. And with all that out of the way, let's talk about the success. So, I am blown away with the support for this story. At this point, it is so well known that when you type Zipp and Hitch in the FimFiction search bar, that is the very first result you see on the site. Though I wouldn't really call this my big break as a writer, but I would call it a good start. So let's get into the history of this story right off the bat. So as soon as I first saw the G5 movie back in 2021, I just knew I was going to write a fic about Zipp and Hitch. Their dynamic in the film probably invested me more than any other character. Aside from maybe Hitch and Sprout, and of course, Sunny and Izzy. The idea that Hitch and Zipp fell in love at first sight was just so adorable. The particular yet kind sheriff with the confused yet headstrong detective just got me. And speaking of that, the moment where I feel like Hitch and Zipp's ship dynamic really took off to its fullest potential was in Chapter 1. Or in Fool Me Once from Tell Your Tale. So yeah, I basically loved Zipp and Hitch from the start. And you know who else does? BellaThePinkSavage. My online sister, who is undoubtedly one of the best artists in the fandom. For proof, look no further than her art of the ship. I can't with some of this. Just look at the art I am showing here right now. You want to know how popular Bella is? She was able to get the attention of the actual VAs of the show. And obviously, she was a big influence in driving me towards this ship. As me and Bella were already friends for years by the time the movie came out, since 2018. So when the movie came out, she was probably more into this ship than I was. And I kept telling her the same thing, that I just knew I was going to write a fanfic about Zipp and Hitch. I didn't know how I was going to do it, or if it was going to be good or bad. It was going to happen. So after a few months, Tell Your Tale came out, and the episodes of Zipp's flight school and the unboxing of Izzy came out. Both of them were huge inspirations for helping me understand their characters better. Zipp's flight school in helping me understand both her persistence and patience, and the unboxing of Izzy with understanding Hitch's particular nature and patience. And then, of course, Fool Me Once. I need to be honest, that episode just was not subtle at all. Everything about the episode literally existed to prove why their dynamic works, which was only present for so long in the movie. The episode made it clear that when Zipp and Hitch start playing off of each other, they ultimately cover what the other lacks. Hitch didn't expect so much admiration from tiny creatures, no less. Then you have Zipp, who is just able to correlate everything to what Hitch likes. And the final inspiration was in Chapter 1, when Zipp's character reached a new level that I just really respected so much. A situation where she tries to figure herself out. And with Hitch, he also reached a new level that I didn't notice at first until Bella told me an interesting plot point. Hitch knows how to confront a situation, but does not know how to solve it. And you can clearly see that in the beach scene. And with that, I learned in Tell Your Tale, this suddenly made sense. So now that I had enough material to make the story a reality, I started writing notes and ideas before writing my first draft. So why did I write my notes and ideas down first before writing the actual story? Well, it's simple. I wanted to finish it. And I also needed to have the ending. And so I needed to have the ending of the story planned before I even started writing Chapter 1. So when I had the ending planned, I could start making plot points and story elements from there and then build it up along the way as I wrote the first few chapters. I was also hoping this way of structuring the story would keep me motivated, and this worked tremendously most of the time. When I finally started writing it, I think it was the beginning of summer. Sure enough, I got invested in my own story. And as a result, my motivation got bigger. And the newest Tell Your Tale at the time was Nay Fever. I point this out because I wanted to make it clear that this is where this story takes place. It takes place after the events of Nay Fever in Chapter 1. And as a result, I didn't know the mare stream was going to be a thing. In fact, that was the original plan. I was going to have Izzy invent some kind of flying device that would take them to Zephyr Heights. However, I decided against that in favor of the more portable flight devices. So yeah, what I'm saying is that I had plans for the mare stream before the mare stream even existed. Although I won't say I was the first. And speaking of the continuity, notice how I don't really reference that much continuity in the story in general. So why did I leave those details out? Well, the main reason is because I noticed most MLP fanfics don't just attract brony audiences. They attract a variety of different audiences. I remember hearing time and again that non-bronies do visit femfiction, hence why I didn't include continuity from the shows. Including these plot points, thus having them matter, could have only alienated casual viewers. So if a non-brony just saw my story to see a love story, then they would get just that. I wanted the story to stand as a story on its own. And so as a result, I didn't want either show to be required viewing. Although I'm aware I did reference some continuity, like the events of Fool Me Once, and Sparky popping up every now and then. But whenever I did reference continuity, I usually kept it light. And yeah, whenever I did introduce them, it's not like they mattered. Hence why Zoom and Thunder were babysitting Sparky. And a few of the other references were just offhanded remarks to further clarify the status of the characters. And even when I did that, I tried to have the characters explain it in a way that a casual viewer would understand. Like clarifying how Hitch and animals just have this thing to them. And how Izzy just has a tendency to be a workaholic. Or, yeah, having the characters act just as bewildered as a casual viewer might be. At some point, I was going to include a scene that would lead right into the events of the Tell Your Tale episode of Queens for a Day. But again, I didn't want either show to be required viewing, so I didn't include it. Although I'm sure a brony viewer could probably tell when that episode happens in the story. I had a lot of decisions going into this story for sure. Although I never showed Bella until I wrote chapter 8, I believe. My decision to bring Bella onto the project was something I had in mind from the start. I had the brilliant idea to bring her on as the fanfic's reader to more or less give me a green light before I posted it. She basically was the fic's entire audience before I posted it online. And she was also supposed to draw the title card. More on that later, but just know that a WIP version is available. To put Bella's reaction simply, she was enthusiastic from the very beginning, and she was honestly a great help. Between offering opinions and suggestions and letting me know she was keeping up with it, and then I went on summer vacation to the beach myself. So I was just sitting in a lounge chair at the beach house writing the story, and suddenly I just see Bella completely losing it with this fic. It was at that moment where I realized everything would be okay for the fic's release, and that it would be a success. Also, yeah, I wrote up till, I believe, chapter 9 till 11 while I was on vacation. I'm a workaholic. I need help. But even with Bella's approval, I was still holding some concerns. What I mean by this is that I had to set limitations for the fic. For instance, a huge problem for the fic since the beginning was word count. You guys know that text expression, TLDR? You get where I'm going with this, right? I didn't want the fic to be too long as to not alienate viewers. As a result, the short word count was one of the main draws. Now, before I really get into the history of how hard this is for me, let's talk about the rules I set for the fanfic and the effect it had on the audience. Rule 1, do not write over 60,000 words, which I didn't. The fic's total word count is 22,345 words. Not even close. Rule 2, only 600 words per chapter, unless the chapter is a key defining character moment. Now, obviously I broke this rule because, like I said, I had an exception. If the characters were opening up to each other or had a moment where they changed, then the chapter could be over 1,000 words. Mostly because I don't know how one can convey what character is feeling or how they're changing in the span of 600 words. Then, of course, I clearly changed that rule the more I wrote this fic. From 600 words per chapter to never write over 1,000 words per chapter. But again, the ability to do these characters justice needed me to write more. Then, of course, there was my biggest fear in this. I was afraid I was going to break character when I was writing for them. I wanted to stay true to these characters, and breaking how they acted was something I was afraid of falling into, given my inexperience as a writer. Yeah, for those of you who haven't seen it yet, this is only my second fanfic I ever made, so the fear was obvious. Now, I want to talk about a constant struggle I had before writing the fic, texting. And then this one particular fear. Nobody reads anymore in the internet era. I'm pretty sure you can tell one is more personal and the other is more irrational, I think. Despite how common it is to text online, I hate texting, because it's just so easy for context to get lost, and that can be dangerous. It can lead to actual people actually getting hurt. And obviously, I didn't want something like that to happen here. However, thankfully, all these fears were put to rest largely thanks to Bella. Again, this is usually why I have someone read my stuff before I post it. If it can work for one, it can work for others. So as for the rest of the fic, I feel was written very well. I didn't really want to change the fic. I touched on every story beat I wanted to show. The only thing I wasn't satisfied about was the ending. Now, here's the odd thing about the ending. I was originally going to write this fic to be 26 chapters long. That's what I wanted, and that's how I wanted it to end. However, when I wrote the ending, it ended up being 23 chapters long, and it wasn't even over 600 words. So why did it end up with 26 chapters anyway? Well, I wasn't entirely sure what else to do by this point. I officially finished the fic by August of 2022, and I more or less took a break from it until September of 2022, when I had an interesting conversation with my friend Zebraprint, who at the time is working on their own story. And yeah, if you guys want to check that story out, please do that by visiting Zebraprint's DA page in the description. But if you're over 18 years old, seriously, I can't even say the title of the story because it's so adult-oriented. So, when we were talking about our stories, it was Z who said that their story would not end when the signature couple gets together, because they wanted to explore as many possibilities as possible before the story ends. Which makes sense. I honestly wish more love stories were like this, where we see the couple get together earlier and see how their dynamic works before the end of the story. And I found that interesting, so I did exactly that when it came to Hitch and Zip. And I took Z's suggestion and introduced it to the story for chapter 24. I think it took me no less than a week to finish chapter 24 through 26. And finally, after I wrote that, was I satisfied with the ending. I felt like I explored enough possibilities with Zip and Hitch's dynamic with just those 3 chapters as a couple, but not without going too overboard. But what do you guys think? Did I explore their possibilities as a couple well enough? And then there was the hurricane aspect. The reason why I wanted a hurricane to happen in the story is because, well, yeah. The obvious answer to that is by June of 2022, I had already experienced a hurricane myself with Hurricane Ida. And I wanted to do something to somehow honor the victims of that storm. And secondly, Maritime Bay is just the perfect location for a hurricane. and I always found that an interesting story idea for G5, especially if the weather is outside of the pony's control now. Imagine what it would be like for our 5 friends if they had to stay in Maritime Bay for a hurricane. Imagine the emotions they could feel, the reactions the characters would have. I don't know about you, but that just sounds like such a cool premise. And yeah, I didn't go far enough with that premise because I wanted that to be the big moment. And of course, I didn't want anyone to lose any context. I might write another fanfic of its own about that concept specifically someday. Who knows? And 3, I wanted the story to make an obvious representation of how they felt for each other, and how that creates this roller coaster of emotions. The storm within is supposed to be a representation of the greatest battle is within. And in terms of whether or not you love someone, I would imagine that would be a confusing ride that you need a lot of time to figure out. And in some cases, that's something you're not going to have. And you'll need to act fast before they leave you. And again, the hurricane in the story made this feeling more intense if Zipp had to somehow leave Maritime Bay, and by extent Hitch if it really made it perish. I know there's going to be an obvious question as to why the weather acts on its own in Equestria now, and I can understand if that's an issue. But my guess is that as time went on and technology became more developed, and yeah, if Equestria was planning on somehow hiding its magic, the Pegasi probably developed clouds and weather patterns that could act on their own entirely, without magic or a need for a Pegasus. I know that doesn't sound like a creative explanation, but I have a feeling that's what happened. They just made technological weather advancements that could make weather act on its own without a Pegasus. And as for everything else, well, I'm actually planning on releasing those potential answers sometime in my next fanfic, so keep an eye out for that. Okay, now I want to talk about what didn't happen yet, the title card, and why that hasn't been included yet. So, I originally planned to release the fic chapter by chapter, starting out with at least 5 of them in mid-September. But I was going to post it with Bella's title card. I was even going to include it in an official PMV that would launch the fic. The launch trailer you saw was more or less a prototype. However, the title card was not ready by mid-September. The title card wouldn't be ready in September entirely, nor would October or November. Eventually, it got to a point where the release of the fic in the year it was produced was vital for the fic's success. So I talked it over with Bella, and she ultimately agreed that the fic could be posted early, and I officially posted the fic on November 27th, 2022. My point is, the title card wasn't ready, so the PMV was never made, and that's why the fic has that description. It's been about 6 months now, and the title card has still yet to arrive. And the main reason for that is mostly because Bella still has her own DA page and her own life. However, I was able to receive a work-in-progress version a while back, and so far it looks pretty good. I basically told her to draw whatever she wanted, but just be sure to fit the hurricane symbol somewhere in the title card. Again, to emphasize the importance of that plot point. Regardless, that's what's been going on if you've been wondering. Sometimes I think she's even busier than me. Bella still has been an amazing, great friend and one of the best internet sisters I've ever had. She actually helped me out a lot during 2018, and she has also been amazingly comforting and helpful in regaining some confidence back during my isolationism period that started back in December of 2021. I really do owe a lot to Bella. And, well, another thing I would imagine is taking up her time, ironically enough, is the fic itself. I can't emphasize enough how obsessed she is with the fic. Literally, before I made this video, she texted me, and I quote, "You blessed me with best ship." Okay. Now, obviously, I opened a Q&A surrounding the fic a while back, but this was unfortunately unsuccessful. And honestly, I blame myself for that, considering I released my 2 trailers for my next fanfic almost immediately after, along with the second round of PMVs I promised. However, I will answer the 2 I got. Now, I'm pretty sure I answered the first one, where I got the idea for this. I just knew I was going to do it. That's basically the short of it. Now, here's an interesting comment. Why Hitch and Zipp and not Hitch and Pip? Okay, first of all, I'm not really into that ship. And again, however, and this is the second of all, I do see why someone would ship them. Mostly because in the first movie, Hitch basically was Maritime Bay's Pip Petals. He's an icon. He loves the attention and admiration of others, although he doesn't seem to know how far that love and admiration goes, or is even aware of how much others would do for him in return. He also likes the simpler things in life, like dancing and going out in style. By the way, credit to G5. Once again, thank you so much for breaking more stereotypes. He's also very affectionate and is willing to give that affection back to others, generally speaking. He's a caregiver as well, hence that one scene in the Tell Your Tale episode, Day in the Life. But that becomes a two-way street. This may also explain why he's a sheriff of Maritime Bay. Did anyone else have speculations as to why Maritime Bay only really had Hitch and only Hitch on patrol for the area? Well, I'm willing to bet Maritime Bay does have more than just Hitch on patrol. Maybe the creatures really do also help him out. My point is that Maritime Bay could honestly get anyone else, but they get Hitch. Again, this is the extent of how far that love and admiration for Hitch tends to go. Hitch is also very particular, and once again, this could explain why he's a sheriff. And going back to Bella's point, he knows how to confront a problem, but he has trouble finding a solution to it. What I'm saying is that he likes an easy solution, one that is within sheriff protocol, and more importantly, he's more familiar with. But one thing that Hitch never ever does is lose his confidence. In fact, it was that very logic that kept me writing for Hitch's character in the story. If he ever lost his confidence, the story would be over and it would fail. Pip, however, does have confidence issues. It's one of her defining character traits. I'm also willing to bet Pip has OCD through this trait. Her status as an online celebrity also makes sense in this logic. Her need to be reassured is the most obvious. This is also why Zipp and Pip's dynamic as sisters works well for me. It's a literal definition of covering what the other lacks. And I feel this is also apparent and abundantly present in Zipp and Hitch's dynamic as a couple. And I pretty much said everything else I needed to about Zipp and Hitch back at the beginning of the video. I hope that answers your questions. And I guess I'll answer one more question, one that I'm more or less asking for myself, one that's inevitable. What do you want for this fic in the future? Well, I want it to be timeless. I want it to have a further success than it already has. Mostly because the only thing about the fic that I'm not satisfied about is where I posted it. Fimfiction. But with that one, I didn't really have a choice. And I hope it's looked back on with fond memories that only get better as time goes on. And maybe, just maybe, gain the attention of a fanfic reader who will read it out on YouTube, and could do a better job at doing so than I ever could. And I think that just about wraps up everything. Maybe I'll create a companion video to this one if I ever get more questions or criticisms about the fic. But yeah, I think I talked about everything I wanted to talk about. And before I go out, I would love to announce my next fanfic. I Love the Star in You. A G5 prequel fanfic about the parents of Sunny Star Scout. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and thank you guys so much for the 224 subscribers.